Hello and welcome to this episode of All Things Policy. My name is Shobhankita, and for this episode, I'm joined by Anupam Manur. Anupam is a professor of economics at the Takshashila Institution, and I'm a researcher with the High-Tech Geopolitics program with the Takshashila Institution. We're here to discuss our recent paper called The Economic and Security Implications of Pakistan's Cryptocurrency Adoption. And this is an interesting time, and it has been an interesting year for Pakistan because suddenly it looks like in 2025 they've decided to legalize, or at least signaled serious intent to legalize cryptocurrency adoption. How do you read this? What is the macro takeaway? What is the lay of the land?
Right. So, Pakistan's economy by itself is fascinating, right? It's you can go back all the way from its independence to now, and it's gone through so many ups and downs. One could almost be tempted to say that Pakistan's economy is almost as volatile as a cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
But in the initial period, it was one of the big Asian tigers. The economy grew. It was the promise of South Asia, really, and then of course it went through its own experience of trials and tribulations. It was, and since the last maybe 30, 40 years, of course, it's experienced deep kind of economic distortions.
Yeah.
The economy has never really taken off, which means that it is plagued with a whole bunch of problems in the economy. So we start with essentially high energy dependence.
Yeah.
So Pakistan's economy, of course, like India as well, but India can pay for it, whereas Pakistan has not always been able to pay for its energy imports, right? So it has, for example, it has gone through multiple periods of balance of payments crisis, where it's been bailed out by the IMF, I think about 25 times, which is, it's a massive record. You have basically deep structural imbalances in the economy, so a bloated kind of public sector, not enough private investment coming through. Growth has always been stuck at that very low period, 2.5-3%, largely explained by the growth in population, right? And productivity growth has been extremely low. So these are, just the kind of, these are broad overview of how the Pakistan economy finds itself, right? Now, amidst all of this, you've got to think of what it means for the currency as well. So Pakistan's currency has not been strong for a very long time. It continuously weakens, and that's very consistent with macroeconomic theory, which is that a country which is largely importing, not exporting much, doesn't get in too much investment from abroad, FDI, FI doesn't come in. So obviously, the currency weakens and depreciates over time. So what this means is, of course, once the currency depreciates, then it means that, yes, theoretically exports should get better, but they're not producing a lot which is exportable. But that also means imports become much more expensive. And when imports become more expensive, that again lands the economy into trouble, which means higher inflation rates. And so Pakistan goes through this almost periodic periods of high inflation. For all of these reasons, and this is just a starting point of all of this, but for all of these reasons, I think they began to realize that maybe crypto is the way out. Start at the same time that Pakistani citizens don't trust the Pakistani rupee because of exactly the same reason. You've got high inflation, a currency which depreciates, which means that anything that they have to import is automatically much more expensive, and a currency, an economy which largely thrives on remittances, right, means that when the Pakistani rupee starts depreciating, that will have repercussions on it, and of course they'll have to pay a lot in exchange fees and so on. For all of these reasons, a large number of Pakistani citizens had already started using crypto, right, as unofficially, of course, right? And so that's the lay of the land of when crypto comes in. And so in 2024, they just started to adopt crypto a lot more, not just the citizens, but officially. I think there's a long timeline which we can go into of how this came into being, but I think this serves as the kind of the starting point of how crypto comes into being in the Pakistani economy.
Yeah, and about 4 lakh people who invest in the Pakistani stock market, and 2 crore is the estimated number of people who are crypto users.
Yeah.
So you see the trust in one as opposed to another.
Correct. And so largely that also tells you that, how much confidence do the people have in when people are not investing in the stock market, that means their confidence in the Pakistani companies are not as much, whereas their confidence in crypto is much greater, right? So that tells you,
Yeah. And I mean, we were talking about the timeline, but charting all the way over the last decade or so from 2014, we see that the government also doesn't have a straightforward approach to crypto, which is that the State Bank of Pakistan has always said it is illegal to deal in crypto, but different government committees at different points in time actually said, oh, maybe crypto is useful for financial inclusion, and there are these specific niche applications that maybe we as a government could potentially leverage crypto for. So there was also mixed signaling from different government wings.
Right. And this is, I think, so this part is consistent the world over, right? As in, apart from very few countries which have taken a very clear stance on this, either to allow or disallow, I think many countries find themselves in this kind of mix, right? So, famously, of course, El Salvador, and we'll come back to the El Salvador experience, but, took a very positive approach saying, we are, going all in on crypto, right? And they did so, and we'll come to that experience slightly later. And maybe some other countries went ahead and just banned it altogether, saying we want nothing to do with crypto. But look at India's kind of stance as well. It's somewhere in between. We have not banned it officially. We tax it. It's not legal tender. You can invest in it, but not really do much else, etc., etc. You can't use it as a mode of payment. Look at the US again. They're saying, okay, we'll wait and watch before Trump does. And we'll come back to the Trump episode again. A lot of things I'm saying we'll come back to, right? But if you look at the US, for the longest time, they just adopted a wait and watch approach. It was not illegal, but neither was it legal tender. It was all kind of iffy. And many countries around the world kind of go through this. So Pakistan is not different, right? So I think in 2014, they're very cautious. 2017, for example, when there was that big bull run in crypto markets, a lot of people started investing in crypto. But then, if I'm not mistaken, the State Bank of Pakistan referred to crypto as basically a Ponzi scheme, right? So I think you see that 2019 there's mixture. The State Bank of Pakistan basically says that we launched this blockchain-based cross-border remittance platform. So in some way adopting or accepting it, whereas the SEBI equivalent, which is the Securities and Exchange Commission of Pakistan, basically took legal actions against companies that were dealing with crypto. So again, there's no clear policy stance that comes out in all of this. 2020 onwards, I think there's a little bit more acceptance of crypto, right? So they set up an advisory committee to say, okay, what do we do? There's provinces in Pakistan that go a little bit more, gung-ho about crypto, but that goes nowhere. So there is a timeline in all of this.
And looks like Pakistan's adoption now, like serious intent to say we're going to legalize this by the State Bank of Pakistan actually revoking a 2018 directive that previously banned financial institutions from dealing in crypto, to officially revoke that and say, now I think we have a regulatory framework that we want to set up in place. At least that's currently where we are at, right? Which is, actually, this was supposed to go through in the sense that a parliamentary ratification was supposed to go through in November 2025, actually legalizing the adoption of crypto. And the SBP had also announced its plans to potentially launch a central bank digital currency, also potentially to make cryptocurrency strategic reserve, and also maybe legal tender. So there was signaling in all directions. The parliamentary ratification was due in November. That hasn't happened.
I think they were caught up doing some other things, right? But it was supposed to happen. It didn't go through, but all other indications until then seems like they were quite serious on this, right? And I think the attraction for Pakistan is quite clear, and you can make sense of it, right? You've got a large youth population who are already betting big on crypto. As you said, the numbers speak for themselves. So they're already on it. Now there's no point trying to ban it. You can't control it. They're aware of that in their own way. But more than that, I think the idea that, again, you have an unstable currency, which will, of course, hamper business, right? You can't export because your currency is not this thing. Imports get affected. So now, if you have a stable coin as such, which is not very stable, but we'll come to that again. You have a stable coin, and it gives you a lot more certainty in terms of exchange rates and so on. So I think the attraction for switching over to crypto, and not switching over, sorry, or adding crypto as a complementary currency in your day-to-day functioning made sense. And so they made big announcements. Of course, let's not forget the role of the US, right, in all of this, because the big announcement was done, I think, one day before the US elections, and it was already clear as to what US position was going to be, right? We knew that when Trump comes into power, or if Trump came into power at that point of time, Trump was big on crypto.
And that was very evident throughout the election campaign.
So that was not a surprise to anybody, right? We knew that, if Trump came into power, it was going to be the US was going to change its fundamental kind of position on crypto. And you have a president openly backing it, openly calling for it, and of course, having family members run large cryptocurrency exchanges, right? So personally profiting from it. And, and since Trump has come into power, we've seen policy changes to this regard. We've seen, for example, Trump pressurizing other countries to adopt crypto a lot more. We've seen Trump favoring countries that have adopted. So even in that sense, it was a no-brainer for Pakistan to say, yes, we're going to do all of this. Whether they do it or not, they made big policy announcements saying, we're going to adopt crypto a lot more, both in terms of strategic reserves and making it legal tender, right? And Trump was very happy with it, right? Very clearly. That had its own set of implications and repercussions. But basically, so before this happened, State Bank of Pakistan and so on said that we're going to make it legal tender, that we have full intention to do so.
And I think the Trump angle here is very, very evident, right? Also because the Pakistan Crypto Council that was established sometime back, which today is called the Pakistan Digital Assets Authority, they actually had a formal partnership with the World Liberty Financial, which actually has 60% of its stake owned by the Trump family. So these partnerships were clear, and I think that was when it first caught global attention. That and honestly, even Jake Sullivan, for example, said that partly because of Trump's willingness to do these business transactions that benefit his family, it looks like the strategic interests of the US are being undermined, is what he had also said, because this seems a lot more transactional than was previously seen by previous administrations. So this Trump angle in Pakistan's crypto, I think, is evident in timelines, in clear partnerships, and also in intent.
I don't think they've even tried to hide all of this, right? I mean, it was a very clear kind of attempt by Pakistan to woo Trump. And as you say, I mean, when they set up the digital assets, whatever, basically a committee to think of how do you implement all of this. They even, let the World Liberty Fund kind of consult them. They asked them for consultation. So they had a very clear, I mean, it's almost impossible to think of this in other circumstances. Let's kind of tear away and peel away the layers and look at what this is, right? One sovereign nation has asked another sovereign nation's democratically elected presidents, family members, to consult with them on their currency matters, which is as sovereign as it can get, right? That is one area where you would not allow others to come in, whereas here that has happened. So clearly that means a lot from a geopolitical lens as well, not just from a pure economic lens, right? And Trump was pleased. Given that what happened later, and we might as well discuss that now, because this was all happening also in the backdrop of the India-Pakistan skirmish or war. I don't know what is the correct term to use there, but India-Pakistan war that happened, which is Operation Sindoor from our side, and clearly the US kind of almost chose sides. And the crypto has, this entire crypto dealing has a clear role to play in all of this as well.
But it's also Pakistan doing it in other ways, right? For example, the Nobel nomination for Donald Trump. Also, it's signaling with critical minerals, because Pranay and Tanmay at Takshashila have written, Pakistan actually has no reserves as it claims. The claim is that we have $6 trillion worth of critical mineral reserve, and any data that's publicly available actually says that it's barely 6 billion of an industry, for a year, and perhaps about 200 billion for all it's worth.
Right.
And that's what you can potentially mine over decades and not in a couple of years. And 6 trillion was perhaps some theoretical number that was, So even the specific critical minerals that the US needs, Pakistan cannot necessarily provide. So it's bluff. It's bluff in every way. And we see...
But the bluff worked.
It worked, yeah. It looks like it, right? And I think that's a serious concern for us here in India, because if between India and Pakistan, the US administration has one partner that they favor over another, then I think that undermines Indian interest, not just in the subcontinent, but also geopolitically.
Yeah, absolutely. And all of this has, implications, but for both Pakistan economy and the Indian economy.
Yeah.
And any implication on the Pakistan economy indirectly will affect us as well, because they're our neighbors, and this is a troublesome neighbor, right?
Yeah.
So if you have a broke neighbor, then it is trouble for you, because that will affect the way in which they behave.
Yeah.
So let's look at the implications for the Pakistani economy, right? Again, we've kind of set the base. It's not a high-growing economy. It is highly distorted. It has got its own set of problems. There's been massive amount of fiscal mismanagement, right? Let me start with that, right?
Yeah.
You've got huge public debt of the Pakistani economy, right? Fiscal mismanagement, as I said, bloated public sector, excessive spending, obviously, on the military and its associated industries. You don't have proper tax collection. I think 2.5% of Pakistani population pays taxes, lesser than India's. India's itself is extremely low. This is lower. Tax to GDP ratio is just about, I think, 10.5%. So clearly, you're not collecting money. In this scenario, you introduce a currency which is going to be even more difficult to trace, right? Which is anonymous. Essentially, you can't trace it. I think that's severely going to undermine Pakistan's ability to conduct many of its kind of day-to-day operations, because it can't collect taxes on an anonymous thing, right?
And no foreign investment is coming in either.
Yeah. So I think this will have a significant kind of a problem on Pakistan's ability to even just, for example, provide public goods.
Yeah.
How can it provide public goods if its tax base actually goes down further?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
How would it manage to do some of these things? And then that clearly would lead to the question of, will then the cryptocurrency exchange and so on be taken over by your MGC, will the JRA complex, right?
Yes.
Will the army be then forced to take this up because they're not getting enough funds from the union government or from their kind of federal government? That's what they call it, right? So that has implications to it, right?
Yeah. So let's break this down, right? Firstly, they're signaling that they would like this to be a strategic reserve, some kind of an addition in their strategic reserve. Firstly, the kind of historical drawdowns that cryptocurrency has seen, all the way from 50 to 80%, is fundamentally incompatible with the stability mandate that a strategic reserve requires. So that's sort of a big bet. And we saw, for example, in the El Salvador example, that it doesn't play out very well, because that's the sort of up and down that you go with along with the cryptocurrency prices.
Correct. So two things, right? One, why do we hold strategic reserves in the first place, right? Why does any country hold strategic reserves? It is to provide a buffer during times of crisis. And so what do you hold as a buffer in times of crisis? You want to hold the safest possible thing, right? Because that's your buffer. No point keeping, buffer of things that might just disappear overnight.
Correct.
Right? Especially during volatile times, you don't want to keep a volatile currency. And that is exactly what now they're doing with crypto, right? So we've seen during times of extraordinary, volatility, the kind of fluctuations that crypto has is far greater than any other currency in the world. And so you look at, as you said, El Salvador's case. I think El Salvador lost about 60 to 75 million dollars overnight, literally. Right, their holdings disappeared because crypto crashed. I mean, Bitcoin kind of crashed. Right, this was during the bear market run of 22-23. Right, and this led to a massive problem. So again, they had to go to IMF for bailouts. They had to basically, they couldn't meet many of their debt obligations, so IMF had to bail them out. When they did, IMF put the condition that you have to now diversify. You can't put all your eggs in one basket. You can't hold only crypto, and they started doing that. Yes. So now, many people will point to the fact that El Salvador has now started regaining its, has recouped its losses and now started gaining because there's been a bull market run. Yeah. But don't forget that they went into that position first, and if the IMF had not bailed them out, I think they would have been in very deep trouble.
And also the IMF doesn't recognize cryptocurrency as a strategic reserve.
Right.
So what do you have to show when you have to, walk into the doors of IMF?
Yes, you have to show some kind of collateral, or you have to say that, I'm capable of paying back. So the El Salvador history, I mean, that particular episode actually tells you why having one, cryptocurrency, an extremely volatile thing as your reserve, does not make sense. Now think about this, right? Think about a situation in which you have Pakistan running into a balance of payment crisis, which happens on a very regular basis. And they've held crypto as their strategic reserve, and crypto crashes. What does Pakistan do? Pakistan will then be unable to import import oil. There will be a crunch in liquidity, so that will impact their economy. Now, what happens when a politically unstable government in Pakistan is unable to, let's say, import oil, or the price of oil shoots up? Military takeover, coup, immediately, right? This is what happens in very unstable democracy. So that will affect us indirectly, right? If you have politically unstable situations like that, and you throw in economically volatile situation on top of that, I think it's a recipe for disaster. For both Pakistan and us. Right? So that's, I think, the first bit which we have to be careful about in terms of what it means, right? The second bit, I think, is equally important, is that Pakistan has always had an energy crisis. Right, as I said, they're heavily dependent on oil, but in between they've had a crisis in which they've not been able to pay their power companies. So you have long blackouts and so on. And now add to this mix that you're going to spend a significant amount of your energy in mining a virtual currency. How does that work out, Shobhankita?
Again, it sounds like a lot of bluff, right? It sounds like they may not actually be able to garner institutional support for any of these experiments. And yet they keep announcing programs for electricity through which they would be able to mine more Bitcoin. So I don't know, it just seems improbable, but at the same time, grand posturing and grand ambitions. But also, what does this mean then for cross-border terrorism and potential also for sanction evasion, right? Because if this is how they're going to be channeling money to fund terror, and some of this is at least difficult to detect, even from the FATF's perspective, then that's a real problem for us in India here as well.
Correct. So on, two things there. So on the energy bit, they've said that we're going to invest a lot more in hydropower and then use that. But now you have to imagine a situation in which your common, whatever, Aam Aadmi, I don't know how you say that in Urdu, but Aam Aadmi of Pakistan has not had power, right? Or does not get power, adequate power, or your industries don't get adequate power, and now you're diverting that power to mine crypto. I think there's going to be, again, uproar, right? So I don't think that will sit well, even if they do manage somehow to divert that power. Okay, let's leave that aside. I think sanctions evasion is a very real problem, right? So there's a whole bunch of sanctions on Pakistan, both because they've been known for terror funding and so on. I think crypto will allow them to do this slightly easier, obviously, right? So FATF, if I'm not mistaken, has a section on crypto, but it's still it's still vague. It's not very well defined. Easier to kind of circumvent that. So I think that is going to be a problem because Pakistan can now use cryptocurrency for, let's say, purchasing weapons or doing other things or dual use technology, whole bunch of things which there was sanctions on.
Yeah.
I think now Pakistan can evade those sanctions using cryptocurrency, right? Even buy from countries which are blacklisted. Those kind of transactions, which earlier they would find very difficult to do through USD because it had to be routed through US banks. Can now be done using crypto. And I think that is a real problem, not just for India, but for the world. Because while India remains, unfortunately, the prime target for Pakistan's, let's say, nefarious activities, the rest of the world is not particularly spared.
And Iran is a good example of a country that has actually used cryptocurrency to evade sanctions, right? They have actually made it mandatory for any new Bitcoin mined to be sold to the central government. So they've made it a state-owned enterprise in some sense. And they've been able to manage, I think, the negative aspects of crypto through extreme state capacity and control. Again, Pakistan's case puts that into question because does Pakistan have sufficient state capacity and control to regulate some of this?
No, not at all. Not at all, right? I mean, so Pakistan has to be worried about this on multiple fronts. One, within Pakistan, what does it mean for, as I said, from tax collection to whole bunch of things, right? If people start using crypto and you can't collect taxes on it, it is a major problem for the Pakistan government, right? But also it loses control over what people use it for. So you have, again, Pakistan has understandable problems, right? A large youth population which is unemployed, and because the economy is not growing, would tend to, get into activities which are outside of the legal boundaries. And so in those situations, you would, normally have at least some form of control, which now is gone because of crypto. It's anonymous, thing. So Pakistan's loss of control over what people do, in terms of like financing whole bunch of activities, whether it could be smuggling, it could be whatever, drug, it could be weapons, it could be a whole bunch of things, right? Now you'd lose control over that. So I think that is a real problem for even the Pakistani government, right? So law and order starts becoming a problem, and it does not have the state capacity to clearly, enforce rules, make up rules, enforce them, trace people, catch, etc. So I mean, I know there would be advocates of cryptocurrency who would say that these are not really problems because you have the different keys and you can actually look and who's doing what. There is an element of traceability, etc. But the big problem, of course, through all of this is that you need a base level of state capacity to be able to do that, which Pakistan lacks. So that becomes a problem, right? And even on, something entirely different in terms of just this might be a mouthful, but monetary policy transmission becomes a problem, right? So inflation is high in Pakistan. Normally, you would control for inflation through exchange, through repo rates and so on, right? You increase the interest rate, but that interest rate is only for the Pakistani rupee. That interest rate has no bearing on a international cryptocurrency. Right, so now you find that tough as well. So what the State Bank of Pakistan does will automatically hold less value in the economy, both for either trying to increase growth through lowering interest rates or controlling inflation through higher interest rates.
So I think we've spoken sufficiently about what this means for the Pakistani economy. Let's talk about what it could potentially mean for India, right? We've touched upon increased avenues for cross-border terrorism and funding, and I think internationally as well, different groups, Hamas and the ISKP, there has been proof that they do use cryptocurrency, and even within Pakistan, I think there have been one or two cases where there have been documented evidence of people using this to get their funding done, right? But apart from that, I think a big concern for India would be the pressure if Pakistan ends up legalizing crypto domestically, and it becomes sort of a thriving crypto hub in the region, then it attracts nefarious actors from India as well. And that's something for Indian intelligence agencies to worry about. And potentially then maybe India would be pressurized to legalize crypto. And it would then be an action that India does not necessarily in its own self-interest, but as a reactive response to what has happened across the border, which again is not a net positive.
Correct on all of those counts, right? I mean, so you start with obviously cross-border terrorism, which already is a problem. So, I mean, the Pakistani government itself has no control over its citizens, the non-state actors that do some of these things. Of course, some of it is through ISI, but the government and ISI are not necessarily the same. You know, a whole bunch of problems within the economy. Now you lose further control with you know, cryptocurrency being there, right? And that obviously has implications for India, right? Now you have greater chance of non-state actors in Pakistan being able to fund cross-border terrorism activities through crypto, right? And that clearly is you know, goes against our interests. But the other bit is on, you know, on money laundering, and I think having a, let's say, a flourishing crypto hub close by would encourage greater kind of money laundering activities, etc., even from India.
Yes.
Right? So, and especially in a state which is very weak. So you add that, right? So you'd say, you know, how does it matter where it is, right? I mean, because crypto is an international currency, it's digital. You'd say the state does not matter, but the state matters. If you have a state which is extremely weak, which cannot trace, you know, your transactions, which has no control, and then you have that acting as a thriving kind of a crypto hub, which is anonymous, which is you know, which lacks traceability, then I think that will be a problem for India. So your individuals in India who were anyway, you know, who were trying to do money laundering, who had to route money through, I don't know, Mauritius and Seychelles and so on, now would find an easier route through Pakistan. So to that extent, again, it is bad news for India if Pakistan has a thriving crypto hub. But the biggest thing, as you say, is that if this happens, and I know there's a lot of ifs here, but if Pakistan somehow does manage to completely legalize, legitimize cryptocurrency, and it does become a thriving crypto hub, and you find that a lot of Indians are now using this as a channel, right, for either evading taxes or sending money abroad, getting money in, whole bunch of these things, and evading, you know, the Indian legal system. What should India do? I think at the margin, Indian government will be forced and pressurized to open up its own crypto markets, much against its own wishes. So it's not again done because of the merit of crypto from a public policy perspective, whether this is good for India, bad for India, etc., but purely to kind of regain some of that control within this thing, right? If you have a neighbor who's opening it up and you know that it's going to kind of stream in, you might as well open it up yourself so that you have greater control. And I think that is a really big problem for India as well.
So some kind of crypto exchanges, which then the Indian government may have some control over, say over monitoring power over. But again, not necessarily in the Indian interest, or at least not in the Indian government's interest to do that.
So I mean, we'll keep that open, right? I don't think we need to necessarily debate the merits of having, you know, legalizing crypto as a legal tender within the country, or having crypto hubs and exchanges, etc. But I think right now, at least, the Indian government will be forced to do something against its will. Let's keep it at that.
So we've spoken about what this might mean for the Pakistani economy and specifically for Indian national interest. What do we think is the most likely of the scenarios, right? Because of all the things that the Pakistani government has signaled, one is legal tender, one is strategic reserve, one is just a central bank backed digital currency, potentially all of the above, and hence a thriving crypto hub, or maybe none of the above, as it happened in November 2025 at least, where this parliamentary ratification just wasn't brought up. It's almost like it was forgotten.
Yeah.
Which I guess for now is good news until the can of worms is opened up again. But what is your sense of the likely scenarios and potentially how India should respond?
I think, I mean, yeah, it's probabilities game. It is a little bit of speculation, but and maybe my guess is as good as yours or anyone else's. But my most likely scenario is that it'll be largely talk and no action, but just for pure symbolic purposes, I think the Pakistani government will hold a small portion of its strategic reserves in crypto.
Okay.
And so that does just about enough to kind of send a message, to send a signal that we are still crypto, and the other things I think it'll be mired in ambiguity for the longest time. They'll say it's legal, but really not provide any kind of other infrastructure to make it legal. I don't think the diverting power to make it happen. I mean, they don't have the capacity to do so. Even having exchanges require a whole bunch of very elaborate set of institutional frameworks, which I'm not sure Pakistan has the capacity to do so at the moment. So I think they're going to keep kicking the can down the road.
While in the short term, gaining that diplomatic leverage that gives them from the...
Correct. And so just do just about enough to ensure that you get the diplomatic leverage. So I think there will be symbolic overtures towards this, which is maybe holding a small chunk of its reserves as crypto. Okay. Allowing for certain kinds of investment in crypto, especially for all Pakistan government can say we'll do something with the word liberty financial or whatever, right? Very easy to do that.
Correct. And tax that.
So I think that's the most likely thing, which means it is good news for India, right? So you just have to watch out for some of these things, but I think India needs to develop its own infrastructure on at least monitoring, evaluating, look at being able to have even crypto forensics to figure out where things are coming from, where it's going, and so on. And I think we have to monitor the situation quite carefully. We need to develop the ability to do so.
And if potentially they do make any significant developments domestically to integrate crypto into their economy, then I think the way out for India then is to ramp up global pressure, specifically with the FATF and so on, right? Because cross-border terrorism affects India, but funding of any kind of terrorist organizations through crypto is actually a global problem. And I think that is then something that India should amp up in diplomatic fora globally.
I think India would be served well by specifically engaging with other countries and trying to develop rules and global cooperation on crypto regulation, especially for things like this. It's in our interest to do so because you've got, again, as I said, an errant neighbor who, if given complete free scape, will use this against you. So it's in our interest to make sure that there is some form of global cooperation, especially, India sanctioning Pakistan will not mean much, but Europe doing so will mean, right? And so it's up to us to go and tell Europe saying, listen, you're also going to be affected by this. So let's make this into, global cooperation on crypto rules. And so,
All right. And do you think there's anything that we can leave our viewers with? I think we have spoken quite a bit about this exciting year and overture to crypto. Multiple kinds of signaling that Pakistan has been showing to the US administration. Crypto is just one of them. Critical minerals is another. The Nobel nomination, perhaps another, if that counts. But clearly, this has serious implications if it does go through. And I think we have tried to speculate a little bit, also predict a little bit as to what might happen. And for now, I think it's good news until it's not.
I think broadly we have to adopt a wait and watch approach, and while, as I said, in the meantime, doing things to mitigate the worst outcomes.
Thank you so much for this. And thanks for tuning in to this episode of All Things Policy.